thank you for tuning into AMWEL's Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee's podcast series, DEI Dialogues. These conversations will spotlight the voices of our AMWELians and their distinct experiences as we spend this year together and celebrate various U.S. Heritage Month. Today's special guest that we welcome to our virtual hot seat is Neil Berenson, Senior Account Director, P-Town Extraordinaire, and a proud member of the Human Rights Campaign. Neil, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Glad to have you. Now, for those who don't know you quite yet, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So for those who don't know me, I have been with AMWEL going on 8 years. So I have the distinct pleasure of seeing this company grow tremendously over the course of those 8 years. Prior to AMWEL, I worked at Athena Health, and then prior to that, I spent approximately 10 years in management consulting, and most recently at Accenture. And then what most people don't realize is I'm actually a trained attorney. I went to law school. I practiced law for about 5 years.
Wow.
And obviously made the big change back into the business. And so I haven't practiced law, obviously, in many, many years, but that is part of my background. I currently live today in Providence, Rhode Island, with my husband, Jason, and our beautiful dog, Betty. And I also have a home. I'm very fortunate to have a home in Provincetown, Massachusetts.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that introduction. We're recording in June, which many will know is Pride Month, celebrating and commemorating lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender pride. Pride Month began after the Stonewall riots in New York City, which was a series of gay liberation protests in 1969 and has since become a global rejoicing of identities and self-expression. So you shared a little bit about your family. I'm curious what attracted you to this month's podcast and maybe what this month means to you.
Sure. So, I mean, specifically what attracted me to this podcast is, really just the opportunity to share my experiences as a gay man with my colleagues. I think most people know me, and I, at least on the account team and client-facing team sides, I think I'm well known. But most people don't know, the whole Neil, which is, I think common for any of us. We are very focused on work, which is obviously very important. But I think it would be, nice for people to maybe see the full Neil and, all the other things that I do outside of work. In terms of Pride Month in June, when I was growing up, I mean, as a child and as a teenager, there was a Pride Month. I was completely ignorant. I did not know it existed. And that's, I guess, to be expected. This was way before the days of the internet and mobile devices. And I was just, a young kid, just trying to come to terms with my identity. And, but as I got older, and certainly when I went to college, and I did go to college outside of Boston, I went to Tufts University, go Jumbos. That's when I learned for the first time what a Pride event was. And I very much remember going to my first Pride event probably I think it was right after I graduated. So it was probably in 1990 was the first year I went to a Pride event. I actually marched in the parade. And that was a huge deal for me back then.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing and for giving us the whole meal today. It's an absolute honor to have you. And I know that in our preparation discussions, you shared a really interesting philosophy around coming out. And I'd love to just cut right to it and ask you at a high level, what is your coming out story and how did that impact the timing of, your childhood conversations as well as, your time in college and beyond?
Yeah, wow. Well, I won't bore you with all of all the painful details of my coming out story, but, I will say that, I always feel very, very lucky to have been born when I was born, which if anyone's doing the math, I was born in 1967. So that makes me 56 years old. So, I was born just at a time, when and you mentioned a minute ago, the Stonewall riots in '69. So obviously I was just a baby back then, or an infant.
Mhm.
But my coming out story, I think, is parallels the greater understanding and acceptance of being, LGBTQ plus in this country. And so, my personal experience was, feeling, as many kids, different, knowing I felt different at a very young age. I have memories that go back to, probably 4 or 5 years old. And then obviously, as you start getting older and as you start, you're supposed to start feeling, I guess if you're a little boy, you're supposed to start feeling eventually feelings for girls. And I love women, don't get me wrong. I have my best friends are women, but I
Right.
just wasn't feeling sexually attracted to women. And
Mhm.
so that is something that I think, anybody who has feelings for the same sex starts to wrestle with as you start becoming a teenager, as you start going through puberty and so forth. But again, because I grew up in the time I grew up in, things were easier for me. I'll just leave it at that. I think if I had been born even just 10 years earlier, my life probably would have been a much different one. So even though when I came out, access to information was very, very limited. I always, joke that I literally went to my town library and tried to find out books on being gay, and there was like one book deep in the stacks,
Oh my
and it was a
gosh.
very clinical book on homosexuality, and it was it didn't make me feel, I should say, any better after, and I was deathly afraid to check it out. So I just read it, in the stacks. Um, so anyway, fast forward, to my college years, and that, like, for again, a lot of people, that is when you start coming in contact with other gay people, and for me, that was the exact experience. I started, even though I wasn't really out, I started to make connections, started being aware of other people who were gay and lesbian, and sort of just observed. I really was kind of in the wings, and just kind of looking at others and seeing how others live their lives. And some people were definitely more out than I was, even at that age. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say that this is when, AIDS and HIV were, terrifying. It was obviously in the news, and it was honestly considered a death sentence. Very early on, it was considered solely a gay disease that only, gay men would get. We now know that that is absolutely not the case. But the living with the specter of AIDS, actually, I think saved my life, because there was a lot of great, again, I went to college in Massachusetts, and there was a lot of great education at the time around safe sex. And so, I really just was able to sort of navigate that in a healthy way, and both physically and mentally. And then, as I got older and I went to law school, I started getting to the point in my life where I said, you know what? I need to start making some decisions, and I wanted to be an out gay man. It's just it's a personal decision. There's no right or wrong time to make it. But hopefully everybody, who goes through this gets to a point where they say, I just don't want to live in the closet. I don't want to have two Neils, present. I didn't want to be the guy that would have one life on the weekends and a different life at work. And so I started slowly coming out. I did come out to my sister first,
Mhm.
and she was amazing and great and supportive, and all the wonderful things that you hope a family member is going to be.
Right, right.
And then I slowly came out to both my parents. And they were also very, very accepting and welcoming. And so I know that that is not the case for everybody. And so I'm just very blessed and fortunate that that was my story.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thank you so much. I can't imagine just the fear factor that you had growing up and this lack of information. And then to see today the access to information and representation and role models, yourself included now, and also people we see on TV and just the media. And then now, of course, the education and community that is in troves. I think the increased visibility and the ease and the way in which these conversations could be held, and the support that this community can give each other is so much more open. I think that's incredible that you kind of rode that wave all the way to present day. So kudos to you.
Well, thank you. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just say that, yes, it is absolutely easier. I won't say, well, you know what, I take that back. I don't know if it's easier to ever come out. I think that, again, is a personal journey for everybody, and you
Sure.
come out when you feel it's right. But there are more role models, and there's greater access to information, which hopefully makes it easier for people today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a huge empowerment, I think, for that authenticity. And I do want to mention and discuss a little bit about authenticity, if you don't mind, because in our conversations as we prepared for this, you mentioned this core belief and this personal vow to never be in the closet, which means coming out in multiple ways into multiple people in different contexts, different workplaces, and also personal lives and corners. Tell us a little bit about that mindset and that mentality, what you've learned from it, and maybe what you'd pass along to our listeners today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, as I mentioned, I made the personal decision to not be in the closet and to be an out gay man. And for me, that meant being my authentic self at work. I have been very fortunate that I have worked in environments at a variety of different law firms and then companies, now Amwell, where I've always felt welcomed. I think it's a little bit of a symbiotic sort of situation. You need to feel that you can come out, that you obviously are not going to get fired, for being out. And luckily in Massachusetts, there are laws preventing that. But I absolutely recognize in other states in this country that is not the case. So a lot of that define where you work and where you sort of decide to live, I think, is a big part of your experience. And I think that's why you do see a lot of people who do come out, moving to cities, usually moving to the big cities, and usually moving to states where things where you can be out and not worry about any of the things I just mentioned. But, again, for me personally, I wanted to be able to talk to my colleagues like we all do. We
Yeah.
all talk about our weekends, and I want to be able to tell them I had a fabulous weekend in P-Town with my husband and with some friends, and we did X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z.
Hmm.
That's really, really, important. I think, again, for anyone's physical and mental health, if you can't be your full self, your authentic self, I truly believe that you are going to be, not 100% well. And that eventually affects you in probably a variety of different ways. So again, I made that decision to be out, and to be that way. And again, I'm having a wonderful experience and have had a wonderful experience here at Amwell, where I think and I think this is important for the listeners to understand, is that uh, coming out is not a one and done thing. Coming out, especially in this line of work, the fact that I work with clients, channel partners, and so forth, means I have to come out over and over again. And you got to be thoughtful about that. This is not about Neil. The work comes first. The work that we do with our clients certainly comes first. But you do have to find that balance on how much am I going to share about myself with a new client who may not be as thoughtful and as open as my family here at Amwell. And so I think I'm sure the other folks here at Amwell who may be gay and lesbian or transgendered may understand that it doesn't extends beyond work too. It could happen in other facets of your life. So it is again, it's something that I will have to work on for the rest of my life, or face, I should say, for the rest of my life. And it's something that it just keeps it real, and it reminds you that unfortunately we do live in a society where there are a lot of great, wonderful, supportive people, but there are still a lot of people who do not support the me being an out gay man, and you sort of have to navigate that all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with such practice and in your high pressure work environments, especially, the advice that you're giving to kind of be patient and gentle with yourself, have those expectations that you can get a variety of responses, and then also just try and find that balance of the way you present yourself is really helpful advice, I think, and might give that extra bravery for those that are looking to express themselves fully to their loved ones, especially. And, on the topic of authenticity in the workplace, I did kind of want to see on the opposite side of that. How are you engaging in your community? How are you able to kind of fully express yourself when you're not working this lovely 9 to 5 with us?
Honestly, giving back to the community is another just core part of my essence, my being. I'm similarly made a commitment that I know that I have opportunities, that have been, provided to me or open to me because I am white, because I am a cisgendered male. And with those opportunities, I think comes responsibility. And so I have always wanted to give back to the community. And for me, it was always trying to find that right organization that connected with my values and what I was trying to do. And luckily, I found the Human Rights Campaign. And for those who don't know what the Human Rights Campaign or who the Human Rights Campaign is, it is the largest organization in the United States fighting for LGBTQ plus equality. And so I'm happy to spend, another session on talking about HRC and, all of that. I could spend definitely hours talking about the work that HRC does. But I got involved about 8 years ago, just about the same time that I started with Amwell. And I started as a volunteer, and I still am a volunteer, and have sort of risen through the ranks a bit. Started with the dinner committee, and then did such a good job with that. They said, "Do you want to run one of the dinners?" So I did that in 2019, right before,
Ooh.
right before the right before COVID hit. And that's a great experience. For me, that was another personal sort of check the box. I knew I could lead a dinner, and there's, again,
Mhm.
lots and lots of moving parts to make that happen, but I knew I could do it. And so for me, it was a challenge, and I'm, happy to say it was a great success. But at HRC, if you do so well at a dinner, they'll say to you, "Hey, would you like to take on more responsibility?" Kind of like work. So, so I am now a board of governor, and from the New England region. So HRC does have a staff based in the District of Columbia, but then they need the support of volunteers throughout the country. So here in New England, we represent the 6 states of New England, and I am a governor on again on that committee.
Wow, that is incredible. That is so, so cool. Thank you for sharing how you kind of moved to that organization. I had no idea that that's how it all worked. I mean, what happens at a dinner? What do you get up to? Are
Oh,
we allowed to
wow.
ask that?
Yeah, of course. The dinner is just a fabulous event. It's fun. It's meant to be a fundraiser, but it's also meant to be a celebration of the community, of all the great work that we've done at the local level, at the national level. We have speakers. We typically get politicians, to join. We have some fun entertainment. It is just an overall great night. So, hopefully you can join us this year.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Thank you for the invitation, and we'll certainly consider how we can make that happen. It's really cool to hear about the celebrations that you've helped facilitated, as well as just throughout the LGBTQ community. But I do want to recognize that we've had some unprecedented hostility towards the LGBTQ community as well, including some legislation to come out of Florida and other predominant red states that have targeted trans youth, especially. And I wanted to give you a chance to just recognize, acknowledge what's happening, and then also, if we could ask you, what's an action item, or what's something that people can do in response to this repression as an ally, and then also maybe as a member of that community?
So, you said it very well. We have made, and again, I mentioned, at the beginning, my personal journey, and just, through the luck of the draw, being born at a time that allowed me to see just nothing but progress in terms of our visibility, in terms of our acceptance, and it's been a great ride, and as I mentioned, it's just allowed me to be my whole self. However, there are people in this country, who have a right to their opinion. So let me be clear: everyone has a right to have their opinion. But what they, in my opinion, and I think others, many others may agree, they don't have a right to put me back in the closet. And that's what they're doing now. This is not coming out of thin air. This is a coordinated effort that is decades in the making. And let me be clear that this is also not just an LGBTQ issue. This is a women's right issue. This is a women's health issue. This is an immigration issue. These are all tied together. There, unfortunately, are forces in this country that do not want to see any of these groups becoming part of the fabric, of this country. And, that's obviously very sad, and can get you down for sure. But, it's becoming real in terms of, as you mentioned, legislation, and it's not just Florida, it's not just Texas. It's your typical pattern as you would expect in the country. And I don't want to, dive into politics, now, but there it goes back to gerrymandering and making it really difficult to vote some of these folks out. They have these super majorities in their legislatures, and yes, they are passing hateful legislation and that's targeting the LGBTQ community. But I think the worst part of it is what you mentioned. They're targeting trans children, trans kids. We're talking about kids under 10. I mean, I just can't even fathom what it's like. And again, I think it's a little bit of the yin and the yang. Kids earlier today have access to more information. They're coming and being born into more loving environments, which is giving them the confidence to raise their hands and say, hey, mom, hey, dad, hey, teacher, whatever. Something's not feeling right. And, whereas for me, it was, hey, Neil's not attracted to Sally. Neil's, more attracted to Tommy. And that in and of itself, was, it was and can still be a big deal. These kids are saying, I don't feel like I should be a Sally, or I don't feel like I should be a Tommy. They feel like they've been born in the wrong body. I can't imagine what that feels like because I don't have those feelings, but yeah, I can understand that. And so the bravery of these children to raise their hand and say, I this is how I feel, and can anybody help me, should be lauded and supported. This anti-trans kids legislation is just wrong-headed, mean-spirited, and sadly will cause a lot of these kids to have mental health issues, and some of them will commit suicide. And I don't want to get us all down on such a joyous month, but that's the reality. And so you asked a minute ago about what can anybody do. What you can do is you can take action. You can join HRC. We welcome everybody. Doesn't matter, where you come from. If you want to be an ally, I mentioned the steering committees. If anybody wants to join here in New England, come see me. I'll get you hooked up. But anywhere you are in the country, I know we're, obviously across the United States and international. We actually work with international organizations as well. That's one step. And if it's not HRC, find an organization that means something to you and dedicate some hours to learning more about the organization and then just showing up. Most of these organizations really struggle with volunteers. And just being there, being committed, and just saying, how can I help, will go such a long way. I think another thing, if you feel so inclined, is marching in these pride parades. This year more than ever, even though they're supposed to be fun and hopefully people do have fun at these parades, you need to understand that these parades actually started out not as big fun events, but as protests. And so sadly, the need to protest and fight is still there. And so I would definitely encourage folks to join organizations and march in these parades if you can do it. And the one last thing is, if you can part with some dollars, again, they need volunteers and most organizations need dollars. So if you can give up, some money or whatever seems appropriate, do that as well.
Thank you, Neil. I mean, firstly, for pointing out the dynamic and complex intersections of all of these dimensions of diversity being interwoven for a story that needs to be more equitable and more fairly representative. I appreciate you calling that out and for sharing what you've experienced and seen in this episode, as well as what we can do to respond. I absolutely think, and to your earlier points, to show out with authenticity, with a little bit of cash, with good walking shoes, with a commitment to just protect and to represent passionately, I can say thank you on behalf of our listeners for sharing that. I
Thank
do
you.
want to close looking at closing out this episode today and leaving the audience with something to engage on and maybe think. So I want to give you the floor one last time. What is a piece of media or a special call out that you'd like to promote with your final minutes to portray and or advocate for an element of your unique experience as a member of the LGBTQ community?
So, I've already mentioned HRC, and there are other, again, great organizations in this country. Again, if you're interested in supporting the LGBTQ, there are, again, many, many organizations at the state level, at the national level. GLAAD is another one. GLAAD stands for Gay and Lesbian Advocate Defenders. And they are attorneys, and they're, fighting the fight. The ACLU is another, obviously, national organization with local chapters. And there's many, many, many more that I couldn't, list all of them here. But I think if anybody wants to just take action immediately is, support those healthcare providers, those doctors, those nurses, those care managers that now many pieces of the legislation actually are targeting the healthcare providers themselves for providing gender affirming care, or in the case of abortion, penalizing them and charging them with a criminal violation if they actually provide what everybody knows is safe and, until recently, legal at the national level care. So absolutely support those healthcare providers. But I would also call out our teachers. Again, I don't have to probably highlight teachers are going through a tremendous amount of stress. They're unfortunately leaving in droves. They don't get paid very well, sadly, and they are also on the front lines of these hateful groups, and they're targeting them. And so go out and support your teacher. And then obviously, support the parents that are standing up for their children in any way, shape, or form. Any child that just needs, extra. I mean, every parent hopefully is supporting their kids, but the ones that are going that, extra mile and taking on something that they're not trained to do, that they weren't necessarily, I know, I don't have children, but I know no parent comes with a handbook, and especially not a handbook on how to raise a trans kid. Support them as well. See if you can help out. Try to get a little educated. The web is a great thing now. Go out onto websites, educate yourself. And again, just, if you can, offer your time, offer some dollars, and it'll make a world of difference. So, thank you so much for giving me the chance to speak today. This has been great. On a personal level, this is something I've always wanted to do. And so really, really appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And happy Pride Month to this episode's listeners. This has been another episode of DEI Dialogues from the annual DEI&B Committee, with many more to come. Please stay tuned for next month.